It is a great honor and a privilege to introduce Israel Shapiro. We're here at your beautiful home in Netanya in Israel. And Israel, you are a second generation Holocaust survivor.
Well, okay. I shall start with most recent, about 10 years ago or something like that. When my father passed away, and we were looking for a place where he should be put to his, how do you call it?
Resting
place. Yeah. So the story goes like that. Just a bit more, 89, I had a son born. And when he was born, we called him Hananel, which means in English, actually means God had clemency, well, something like that. And we were sitting at my parents' home, me and my brothers and sisters, and they were like teasing me, where did I find such a name to call my son? And I said, you know, actually Hananel in Eastern Europe was called Kalman. It comes from the French word Clement, which is pronounced Clément. And when it emigrated to Eastern Europe, it was a bit corrupted and became Kalman. And my father all of a sudden tells us, you know, I had a cousin named Kalman. And then came the story. My grandfather was a rabbi in Poland. He was a son to a very known dynasty of rabbis. If we go 400 years back, we have one of the greatest European Kabbalists, Jewish Kabbalists, the Rabbi Neta Shapiro, the Megalei Amukot. And actually I am of his descendants, son after son. And about 200 years ago, one of his descendants married the daughter of a very known Hasidic rabbi, the Koznitzer Maggid. And my great-grandfather was a Koznitzer Rebbe in Warsaw, a descendant both of the Koznitzer Maggid, Rabbi Melech of Lizhensk, and the Belzerov. And for my mother's side, who was a cousin of my my grandfather, we were actually also descendants of the Tzanzerov. So that was a very prominent dynasty in Europe. And my grandfather was a rabbi in a town, and a very known rabbi also, who had both Jewish learning, known for Jewish learning, but also had secular studies. He studied also secular studies, and was what you call a man who knew how to integrate in each and every society, and knew how to speak to his kehila, whoever were the members of the kehila. He wanted to come to Eretz Israel, and he tried all the way in various means, but God intervened and wouldn't let him come. And in one of his endeavors to come to Eretz Israel, he wrote a letter to a cousin named Kalman, who was here in Eretz Israel, and asked him to try to get a certificate for him, because at that time the British wouldn't let Jews come to Israel. It was in the 30s, in the 1930s. And that cousin, apparently, he was a member of Beitar, and very prominent there, and had connections. But that cousin was murdered by Arabs on 1935. April 1935 was murdered by Arabs. So the letter maybe got here to Israel to him, but he couldn't do much after because he was killed. And that's what my father told us at that time.
And which town was your grandfather Rav in? In which town?
The town is called Pshitik. Pshitik, it's a town in southern Poland, not too far from Lodz, and from a district town called Radom. Quite a big town. Afterwards, we were looking for the grave of that cousin Kalman, which took us a long time to find, and we didn't find it, but when my father passed away, we decided we should try to get him buried near that cousin, and we succeeded. So they actually, my father is buried in the Mount of Olives, high on top, not far from where his cousin was also the resting place of his cousin. That's the story. So my father, I'm going back now to my grandfather and where my father grew up. As I said, he was himself, my grandfather was a rabbi of a town and the son of one of the known rabbis in Warsaw. A whole dynasty, all his brothers were rabbis, his sisters were married to rabbis. My grandmother, who was his cousin, also, all her brothers were rabbis and sisters were married to rabbis. A whole lot. 5 or 6 survived the Holocaust. That's all. When my father gave his interview to the series, the Spielberg series, that was in the summer of '96, as far as I remember. And we, the sons and daughters of the family, we gathered also. It was summertime, so we came with all the grandchildren. At that time, there were only 30 of them or something like that. We are 8 brothers and sisters. And my father told them a story, which afterwards in the shiva of my father, my uncle elaborated. They were, after the war broke out and after the Germans occupied Poland, it took them a while till they did what they did with the Jews. And at a certain point, all the Jews from all towns and villages around Radom were deported to Radom and put there in the ghetto of Radom. And the young boys were taken by the Germans to work in German army camps and depots, especially from 41 and on, when the Germans were fighting in the east. So they had, not far from Radom, they had a large army depot, because it was a place of a railway junction. So they had a depot just near that railway junction, where they would bring, from the east, would bring in like damaged vehicles and so on to have repairs, and it was also a logistical base from where they would send out the whatever supplies the army fighting in the east needed. And they took the Jewish boys to work in that depot to do all the manual and heavy work. They treated them quite fairly. That was the army, not the SS yet. Treated them quite fairly. There were, of course, some anti-Semites there, but mainly. And comes Yom Kippur, September 42. And they asked permission to have a break and have prayers. And the army commander there gave them the permission, said, fine, have a break, have your prayers. So they gathered behind the shed and they arranged for a minyan. And they're standing there praying, and a train coming from the west stops there. It was a train full of Belgian Jews directed to Auschwitz. And the train stood there waiting because the line ahead was busy. This train stood there for maybe 2 or 3 hours. And in one of the cars, someone who was strong enough probably got up and tried to see where he is standing. So he tore away the barbed wire and looked out, and he sees a group of Jews praying. And he started shouting. Yes, listen, he said, we are Jews from Belgium, and they are taking us to kill us. Remember, you must have revenge. He stood there for about 2 or 3 hours, the train stood there, and he kept calling them again and again, remember, you must have revenge. And my father, when speaking to the interviewers, yes, he got up to the windows, opened the windows, all the grandchildren were playing outside. He says, you see, this is my revenge. My parents have more than 50 grandchildren, and today when we meet the tribe, we're about 300. So my father was there in that army depot for a while. Now, at the end of 42, they were having, I don't know exactly the historical background, but all Jews in Poland and in all other occupied countries were transferred to the to be under the jurisdiction of the SS. So also my father with his friends were sent out to Auschwitz. Well, my father had his young brother with him. My father was born 23. His brother was born at end of 27. So like he was 14 or 15. And my father took him with him throughout the whole 5.5 years of hell and brought him here to Israel, which is a story in itself. I'll tell you in a moment. We'll go back and forth because it really doesn't matter. They were transferred to the SS, sent to Auschwitz. Coming down from the train, and you heard some descriptions of how they were, the kind of reception they got them, and they stand there for selection. And Mengele stands there and looks at the people and goes like this or like this. And my father looks and says that he's sending the weak ones and then the small ones one side and the able-bodied to the. My uncle was young and short, and my father switched places with him, so we stand in the middle, and asked the guy near him, he said, together, and they told my uncle to stand like this with his elbows folded, and they put their hands behind his elbows and pushed him up so he would look higher. And that's how we passed the selection. And they were sent to, since they were able-bodied, they stayed in Auschwitz for a few days till the, orders came, and they were sent to some German labor camps all around Germany, from one place to the other. All kinds of work, yes, with really not easy places. But my father, who had that quality of reading people's mind 3 steps ahead, was able to keep himself and his brother together in a comparatively well condition. Because you see, when my grandfather wanted to come to Israel, he knew that there is not a great demand for rabbis here in Israel. So he said, okay, so I should be a farmer. He even looked into the possibility of buying some land, but didn't have a chance. So what he did is, at the backyard, he put up a whole garden with various plants, like to learn how to grow. And my father liked that very much. And he was working in that yard a lot. So wherever any new camp they came, he would go to the commandant, the SS commandant, said, listen, I'm a gardener, a professional gardener, and I can make you here a nice garden and have flowers and have vegetables and have everything. And they liked that. The Germans liked that. So they said, okay, why not? And he would take his brother as his helper. And that is how they were able to manage. Together with the hard work, they got a bit of a better, what do you call it, the treatment, because they did also the garden and so on. And they were able to quite go through it. Not easy.
So how old was your father and his brother at this time? When they got to Auschwitz?
When they got to Auschwitz, my father was 19, and my uncle was like 15. But they were not kept in Auschwitz a long time. They got out, like they were sent to labor camps from there, like many others who were sent. Now, just to tell you what happened with my uncle. When my grandfather tried to come to Israel, as I said, he wrote letter to a cousin who was murdered. He wrote letters to the Jewish agency in Israel, and they said, we can't help you, the British won't give you and he sent a letter especially to Rav Kook, who was the chief rabbi. We have a copy of that letter where he describes his ancestry and so on, and he says, if you don't want me as a rabbi here, I should be a farmer, but please try to get me here on a ticket of a rabbi. It didn't help. The man who got the letter and was supposed to bring it to Rav Kook fell ill with a typhoid fever, and his daughter also got the typhoid fever and died of that. He had other things in mind, and it was not like that now. It was the 30s. No one knew what's going to happen. So he had his. And then he tried to get to Israel by saving money, because if you had 1,000 British pounds, you were allowed to come in as a man who has enough means to sustain. Because they had the British had the rules. And they actually it was not easy, but they saved on any penny, and at the end they had the money. And then in Poland they had a crisis, an economic crisis, and they passed a law that no one is allowed to take money out of the country. And then 42, when my grandfather saw that he's not going to make it anymore in the ghetto, and they were going into the ghetto every time and taking Jews out and sending them to Treblinka. He gave the money, which was in gold coins, he gave it to my father and said, take that money and keep an eye on your younger brothers, the brother and the sister. So the brother, as I told you, my father kept with him, and the sister, she told us that my father used to send her money and clothes and food with German soldiers. He had that rare quality. He could read people's mind. He could see whom he can make business with, and so on. And he did that. And he was able, he told me, to keep those gold coins even in Auschwitz. Was able to hide them from the Germans, And not only from the Germans, from other inmates, because there were all kinds.
Where did his sister go?
She was in women's labor camp, and then also she got to Bergen-Belsen, I think, and so on. And after the war, she was taken. She was the Swede. She was taken to Sweden with the Jews and so on. Stayed there for a while, and in '48 came here to Israel.
And did your father ever tell you how he managed to hide the gold coins? That's unbelievable.
He just told me that in Auschwitz he had those wooden clogs, so he made a hole in the sole and put them underneath. Somehow, I don't know, but somehow he kept them, and from time to time he would use them to buy his way out of tight situations. But the interesting thing is the last gold coin he was in Dachau. He gave to an SS guard in exchange for a loaf of bread. So desperate they were. And that's a story in itself. I'll try to start with it. About January 45, if you don't mind, I'll put it.
This is just one. If I could see the picture again, because your father was unbelievable. He had such an insight and
It was unbelievable. Man made of steel. They were sent to a salt mine in a place called Kochendorf in southern Germany, not far from the Austrian district of Salzburg, where there were salt mines. The Germans then had a plan to turn those salt mines to underground factories in order to escape the bombings of the Allies. So they had to widen the mines, like blow up parts of the rock, take them out to make place for the factories. So they took pressed labor in order to take out all the rubble out. Yes, there were all kinds of workers there from all over Europe. But the Jews, as always, were. When they got there, the head of the camp there, Kochendorf, yes, was nicknamed by the Jews Beinbrecher, which means the man who breaks bones, yes? Like they come, they get out of the transport, and then guy goes around, looks at my father, he says, "You are too fat for a Jew." Because my father, as I said, was able always to keep well, and on the spot, 25 lashes, just because he looked fit. And well, every day they would go like 800 meters down with a lift, yes, to the mine and pile up the rubble and take it, and carry it out. Hardly get any food though. Hardly get any food. Nothing. Every day, just like some kind of a soup, if you could call it a soup. And if you were lucky, you could find something inside, a piece of cabbage or something inside. In 3 months, yes, my father told me, he didn't speak much about things, but he told me like after 3 months he weighed 37 kilos. Like they were walking skeletons. At the end of March, they took them out and marched them to Dachau. 4 days, 1,400 Jews out of Kochendorf, 700 reached Dachau. Dachau was like a resort place compared to what they had. He wrote a short essay describing that march. They arrived at Dachau on the 10th of April. And on the 26th of April, they were taken out on a death march to Austria. 700 Jews who on the way were gunned down by the Germans. But my father escaped just before that. They were sent by train. The rails were bombed, so they got them out and started marching them. Night came. They were near some village, so the Germans took the Jews and put them out to sleep in the barns in the village. And that SS guard who got the money from the last gold coin from my father, and ever since then used to smuggle every day some food for them, which was unusual. He took my father and my uncle with a group and put them in the last barn in the village, and told my father, listen, in the morning when they are going to collect all the transport, don't come out. Hide behind the store, and no one should know you are there. They would shout and would anything, yes, just don't move, don't answer, don't come out. I'll try to cover for you in the roll call. And he said, in this direction is the Swiss border, and I heard that refugees can cross.
This was the SS?
Yes, an SS guy. So in the morning, they did just that. They waited. And the Germans went away. And as I said, afterwards, they gunned all of them down. Actually, in Yad Vashem, they have a book called Minharot Ashmedai. That's how it's called, the Devil's Tunnels. Okay? Where someone else from that camp of Kochendorf describes everything, and I read that was the end of that transport. And so they came out after they were sure the Germans are away. They came out and marched 3 days in the direction of the Swiss border. Now, whenever they would see a policeman or something like that, my father would put them like in 2 rows, marching, not trying to run away, marching there. They had some boxes with Red Cross covering, and he would approach the policeman and said, listen, Red Cross has sent for us, we are going to the Swiss border, what is the direction? In that way, that no one would be suspicious. It was already the end of the war. If it was maybe earlier, maybe it wouldn't have worked. But at that time it worked, even if it didn't try to run away. And they did that. I had all kind of one of the group died out of exhaustion on the way, but there were 9 who reached the border town. And they went to the mayor's office, told them the story also and so on. Mayor said he can't help them much, but he gave them like food, food stamps. So they went to buy some food. After so much of what they did, the food didn't do much good for them. My father told me he was really sick because of that. But the next day, 1st of May 45, they approached the border in Switzerland. Actually, Liechtenstein and Switzerland. A place called Kirchdorf. I think it's at Gallen district, canton. And they come there 1st of May, and on that day the Swiss decided to close the border. Thousands of refugees from all over Europe are gathering there, trying to cross the border, and the border is closed. But when they approached, 9 Jews from the camps, the way they were, yes, they looked, unbelievable. The people made way for them, helped them get to the to the border gate and started shouting to the border guard to open the gates and let them pass. Now the border, there are two gates, the German one and the Swiss one. The German opened the border and they got to the Swiss gate. The Swiss border guard called his officer. The officer came, looked at them, said open the gate, course, told them wait here, I'm going to check for what to do, yes? So they sat there waiting. Now I'll tell you what my uncle said. It was 1st of April, it was still very cold. So they gathered some wood and made a small fire to warm up. He said, we didn't sit like this. We all sat with the back to Germany.
Wow.
They waited there. My father said he won't speak to anyone, only to the media, only to journalists. So 2 or 3 journalists came, I don't know exactly what. Anyway, they took them and brought them to hospital and treated them, of course, and then asked them whatever. It was the first group of Jews from camps to reach Switzerland. So it was the first time that the Swiss saw what their cooperation with the Germans brought about. I don't know if they have anything like conscience, but if they have anything near it, so probably something moved there. Because they treated them, and after that they told them that they would get whatever they want. Whatever they want. If they want to go to the United States, they can go to the United States. If they want to stay in Switzerland, they say they would make a special rule to let them stay in Switzerland. My father said no, only Israel. So the Swiss got them certificates. On August 45, my father was already here in Israel.
And the Swiss government, they organized it?
Yes. Yes. Unbelievable. It's a story, you know. I'll tell you this one, which is also, when I was bar mitzvah, like Friday morning, you know, we are all preparing for the Shabbat and the event. A boy, and I asked my father, what was your bar mitzvah sedra? He says, I don't remember. I remember my mother was shocked. She said, you don't? She said, you don't remember? And you know, I remember like the picture is engraved. He stood there in a voice that I never heard him speak like that. Said, we never knew how we will survive the next 2 minutes. In his ID was written the 1st of May 25. Okay, why? Because it was the 1st of May 45 when he crossed the border. Said that's my new birthday. So we just gave 1st of May 25. 1st of May 25. I don't remember. But then, when my firstborn nephew became bar mitzvah and got up and started reading, my father all of a sudden tells and says, that's mine. Came back to him.
Came back. Unbelievable.
Well, I think that's...
Yisrael, I just want to ask you, what happened to the rest of your father's family?
They were sent to Treblinka.
So who survived? His brother and his sister?
Yes.
And anyone else from immediate family?
There was one who came here, I think, before the war. I remember her. And there was, well, okay, a very famous cousin of my father. She was the Rebbetzin of Satmar. You know Rabbi Eilish of Satmar? No. His wife was a Shapiro, was a cousin of my father. They were sent with the Kastner train to Switzerland before so she also survived. But she had no children. The other cousin who lived here in Israel, she had cousins, and I think there was only one more, which I didn't know. That's it, of the family.
And the rest of the family were all...
Yes.
Do you know where they were mainly sent? Was it mainly Treblinka, or did some go to Auschwitz?
Some died in the ghetto in Warsaw. Some in Treblinka. I don't know. We don't know exactly. Of course, some came to Israel before the war, so they survived. So you see some of the Shapiro family, where my father is buried in the Mount of Olives, in that plot, there are about 5 or 6 of the Shapiro family who came before the war here to Israel.
And Israel, if I can ask, you growing up, did your father ever speak to you about being a survivor?
It is complicated. When we were young, I believe my father, like many survivors, tried to forget. He had that striped jacket he kept at home, okay, but hidden away. He hardly ever spoke about anything, hardly ever mentioned. And same with my uncle, hardly ever mentioned. I remember when I was 9 years old or something like that, I was also Motzei Shabbat. I visited my uncle, and they were having there some friends and sitting down and having Melave Malka and so on. And I remember after everything, like they're sitting there and just quiet. And one says, so, just like that goes, so. And I think it was my uncle says, we are trying to forget. It was too much.
So when you were growing up,
only many years afterwards, we first learned of what Shoah was when Eichmann was tried. Okay, and maybe even at that time yet, my father wouldn't speak about it. He spoke about life before the Shoah, but also very rarely. It was too painful for him. And it's only like many years afterwards, when we had already our kids, with the grandchildren, he spoke a bit, not much, but he spoke a bit. Yes.
And did a lot of his friends, were they survivors? Did he mix with survivors over here, or?
Well, it's very difficult where I lived, there were survivors also, others, yes, but I don't think they ever exchanged things. But for the group, that group of 9 people who went, I know that in Switzerland, I'll tell you in a second, in Switzerland they said, like, when we come to Israel, we'll all be in connection. I never knew of them. We had a picture at home of the group, but not more than that. And in the Shiva of my father, we're raising all those, and we were showing that picture of the 9 of the group. And as it happened, a good friend of my sister was there, and she looks at the picture and he says, my father has that. And she went home and brought a booklet which is her father published. Yes, apparently he was from Hungary, and he was actually with this group he was, when the group was put in the barn. Yes, the SS man after a while opened the doors and brought 2 young guys into that barn together with them, and her father was one of them, of those 2 added persons.
Can I ask, Israel, did you ever ask your father if he ever saw Mengele himself?
He saw, as I told you, he saw Mengele.
But did your father tell you that he saw him, or?
It was I think a bar mitzvah of one of my nephews, where they sat there together with my uncle and they were started talking, and then they told us this story.
Where he lifted up his brother.
Yes.
Wow. And why do you think the SS decided to do what he did?
Well, the SS man in
with the barn, and to save your father in the night.
Well, I'll tell you what my father told me. Yes, he hated the Poles. He didn't hate Germans. He said that in Germany you could still find decent people, not in Poland. And probably because it was already the end of the war, so the SS man, had, we don't know. We really don't know.
And Israel, I just want to ask you, when your father did the Spielberg testimony, did you watch it straight away, or were you with him when he was doing it?
I don't remember. I really don't remember.
But
it was many years ago.
How did you feel when you actually saw it for the first time?
Well, we did hear something. I remember, like when I was 18 years old or something, 17, even less. It was on Yom HaShoah. There was something on the television, and I was watching. And my father came from work, got into the room, switched the television off, and asked, "What's the matter?" And he said, "Even without that, I wake at least once a week in Auschwitz, and now, if we have this, tonight I'll have my nightmares."
And did he tell your mother? Did your mother know what he went through?
My mother would never press him. If he felt like telling, he said. If not.
And have you ever been with you yourself, or did your father ever go back with you? Did you ever go back to Poland or to Germany?
My father forbade us to going to Poland, not Germany, Poland. Even when they started those marches and so on, he wrote an article which was actually published in Ma'ariv, in a newspaper, that he is against that.
So have you yourself personally ever gone?
And my father said don't go.
Would you let your children go?
My children don't go. They know that my grandfather didn't want them to go. I got nephews who did go, but not my children.
And have you ever been to Germany, or would you go to Germany?
Well, I passed through Germany when I was flying, so I passed through Germany as a connection place. I've been in Frankfurt a few times, but my father himself drove a Volkswagen. That was his opinion. He said that the Germans, yes, most of the Germans, yes, as I said, didn't have any choice. He said, "What do you think? An army soldier, yes, or something like that, yes, or even an SS man, when he volunteered, he didn't know what's going to happen. But after he's inside, what can he do? Of course, those who were wicked were wicked. My father gave testimony against many SS people after the war." So they would be tried.
Where did he give the testimony?
Some of it in Switzerland, and some of it here in Israel. When they were doing all kinds of things, he did.
And when the Eichmann trial came about, was he watching it, or did he discuss it with you, or was it an issue?
I don't remember. I was a boy. I was 7 years old, 8 years old. I don't remember.
And the Kastner trial, do you remember when they had the Kastner trial?
I remember the Kastner trial. Interestingly enough, well, let's say like that. My father said that those who accused Kastner were not better than Kastner. Okay.
Those that went on the train.
No, not those who went on the train. Those who accused Kastner.
Those that accused Kastner.
He said they were no better than Kastner. Probably he knew some of them in the camps.
Those that accused.
Probably he knew some of them in the camps. But that's it. Never did I hear any opinion about. Not only that, I remember him just once when I was commenting something about Kastner. He told me, "And whom do you think accused him? Those who accused him were not better than him, maybe even worse." Something like that. He said like something that, as if one of them at least was a couple. And he knew what he was talking about.
And Israel, if you can just show the picture of your father again, your father's wearing he's wearing a kippah. So, yeah. Did he, having gone through what he did and having lost his family, except for his brother and his sister, and if, those that were here before, but the majority of his family were all annihilated. His emunah, did he always retain his emunah, his faith? Because it's a very hard question, but
I never discussed his emunah with him.
But he would go to shul. He was from.
Of course, he would go to shul. Not only that. When I grew up, he chose for me, yes, yeshivot to go, where he had to pay money for that. I could have stayed in public schooling, yes, which wouldn't cost him anything, but he went to the length of sending me to private yeshivot where he had to work hard and pay for me. Okay? So, you understand?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Israel, it's amazing. Can I just ask you, Israel, I mean, you as a second generation, but you really lived it. I mean, what message?
To a certain degree.
What message do you give to your children and grandchildren and for the future generations? What message could you give to the future generations?
Well, it is difficult to say because first of all, one must understand we grew up in a normal house. My father really did not let anything overcome him. And my mother was a very clever person with a lot of, sensitivity and knowledge and intelligence. And she knew how to navigate, because it was not easy. From time to time she would tell me, don't think it's easy to be married to an Holocaust survivor. Yes, but she succeeded in that. And we grew up in a totally normal house. There were no shadows. Yes, really, no shadows in the house. My father had a very good sense of humor, and probably that also what kept him, yes, throughout. Which is one of the things which I try to get to my children also, and I think I succeeded, having a good sense of humor, which means you can also laugh at yourself and yes, and so on, and at life. That's yes, and I don't know. If I go through the story of my father, you see that on the one side, you see how his initiative and strengths, yes, and on the other side, you see how, like what maybe some people would call chance, I called divine, yeah. Yes, kept him. Like, you know what? After the Gush Katish thing, I remember sitting at home. All my kids were there on that Shabbat, and they were like saying, "Well, so what's worth like sacrificing and fighting, and then so on? In the end, when you lose." That's when I told them the story with the money, with the golden coins. And I told them, you see, the money which my grandfather saved didn't get him to Israel, but it got out my father to Israel at the end. Not in the way they expected, but it did.
And it saved his life.
Yes. Yes. That's what I try to get to my kids. That if you believe in something, do it. Maybe you'll have only 10% success. So what? So what?
Israel, I just want to thank you.
I've been playing with my kippah all the time. I hope it did not.
Not at all. Israel, I just want to mention, it has been such an honor, really such a zchut to be here in your home and to hear your story, and I think it is absolutely unbelievable, something remarkable and incredible. And here you have the picture of your father and your mother.
I agree with you.
And I think
unbelievable.
you had the most amazing parents, because having gone through what they did, and you said they had a normal home, and you just see how incredible you look at life, and how you are an example for all of us to emulate. You really are. I think it is absolutely unbelievable, the story, and I am so grateful that you've related it, and it's going to inspire so many people. It really will. And I really want to thank you. I feel really honored to have met you.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you very much.
And you know, the greatest revenge is what you said when your father looked out the window and he showed the grandchildren, and now the great-grandchildren, and Am Yisrael Chai.
Sure.
Thank you so very much.